What's up, everybody? It's Rhino Ride, and I'm going to show you how to take the front wheel off of a 2006 Honda CBR F4i. You can see how I have my bike strung up. Yeah, ratchet straps to the rafters of my garage. I didn't have a stand, so I had to improvise. But it got the wheel off the ground. As you can see, it spins freely. Not very well, because I need new bearings, but it spins freely. So the first thing, once I mount the camera to my GoPro mount here, first thing you want to do is start removing your brake caliper from the rotor. You got two 12mm bolts. There, I show you it's a 12mm. Two 12mm bolts. I had previously loosened them, so you just take those off. You pop the rotor right off of the caliper. Or, I'm sorry, the caliper right off the rotor, rather. You're not supposed to let the caliper hang like that from the brake line, but I really didn't care. It's kind of like algebra on these bikes. What you do on one side, you have to do on the other. So remember that and kind of do it in unison. If you do a caliper, do the other caliper. Once you get to the pinch bolts on the left side, do the pinch bolts on the right side. Just take your time and do everything step by step. See, I come back to the left side here. It's time to remove two pinch bolts. Now, I believe those are 12mm. The pinch bolts are what hold the forks onto the axle. And whoever had put these on here before definitely didn't put them to spec. They put them way too tight. They're only supposed to be 23 foot-pounds of pressure. And they had them on there probably about 50. Probably the guy that owned the bike before me. And so once you take those off, you're going to go around to the other side. You can see I'm pointing them out. And take those off as well. And bear with me. I got the camera sped up enough. This shouldn't take too long. There we are. And I leave. Done. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take the main axle bolt is what I'm doing. It's on the throttle side there on the right side of the bike. That was on pretty tight. You can see my bike rocking back and forth because it's just swinging from those ratchet straps there. Go ahead and get that guy off. It only takes about 3 or 4 turns or so, and it should be able to spin freely. If it doesn't, you need to clean out the threads and make sure it's nice and clean. Back on the left side here, I went ahead and removed those pinch bolts, and now it's time to back out the axle there. There's a lot of components inside that wheel that the axle is actually touching, or really close to touching, that you have to be careful about. I just went ahead and got a screwdriver. On the F4i's, there's a little hole in between the axle to where you can just walk that axle right out. You can see me walking it out. The right side is going to let go. It's going to make it kind of tight in there, and as long as you finagle the tire, put a little bit of pressure on that on the axle, it'll walk right out of there. And once it walks right out, that tire is going to drop. Eventually. Come on, Rhino, you can do this. Here we go. Attaboy. And no, my axle isn't bent. That's because the GoPro is curved. I just noticed that. GoPro's got a curved angle lens. Wide angle lens. So set that aside. Keep it clean. Mine actually fell down and I got dirt and dog hair on it. And there's a whole bunch of grease on there. So set that in a really clean spot. You don't want any dirt or grime or anything. I had to really clean it. You can see me inspecting the bearings there. The first thing you're going to see is actually a collar. Go ahead and pop that collar off like I did right there. And then the next thing is going to be a dust seal. You can see Pop, there goes the dust seal right there. Go ahead and pop that off. Right behind the dust seal, you're going to see your bearing. Do not try to use a screwdriver on the bearing. Do not mess with the bearing in any way with any other tool than a bearing tool, bearing removal tool. Sometimes they cost around $30-$40 if you can find them right. Real good ones cost around the $100-$150 mark, mainly because they come with different sizes and different things to do different bearings. So do not get a screwdriver in there and try to pop this thing out. You'll do damage to your wheel and the bearings. Here you go. Use a bearing tool. So that's exactly what I did, was use a bearing tool. Here's pictures of the old bearings. See, they weren't that bad. They weren't worn down too much, and the races are in really good condition. As you can see right there, it is smooth as glass. Looking into that bearing, into your axle sleeve, and then out to the other bearing. And this is later on that night once I got my bearings pulled out, and I took them to a buddy of mine who had a bearing puller, put them back in. First thing I'm going to do is put these collars in. As you can see, one is bigger than the other. There's a large collar, or there's a small collar, and there's a large. Small, large, small, large, small, large. Okay. The small collar goes on your left side. That's the side of the bike with the clutch. Okay. This is just on the F4i. So the small collar goes over there. Just push it in. It's going to sit flush against your bearing. And it's also going to go inside of this dust seal, that black dust seal that you popped off. The large collar goes on the other side. That's the side that has the main axle bolt. And if you have a different bike that has a main axle bolt on one side, I imagine it goes the same way. What you're going to do is take your axle. You do have to re-grease it. So there's my all-purpose grease there. And you don't need to grease a lot. Don't dip the thing in a grease pan. You don't need that much. I'm just squirting a little bit out, getting a little on my finger and rubbing it all over that axle. Getting it nice and lubed up in case there's any friction, going on inside there. Now, you're going to line up your bearing with the axle sleeve that's in there. You can use your fingers, you can use a tool, but like I said, you want it as smooth as glass in there. And it is somewhat fairly difficult to line up, so make sure it is extremely perfect. Once you get your axle lined up, you can see me cleaning out, and I got to put my axle sleeve back in because it had fallen out. Put your axle back in, make sure everything's lined up nice and good. It goes all the way through to the other side. You have to take it back out one more time to install the tire. Or wheel, rather. Okay. Set it to the side there. Put the wheel back into the forks. You're pretty much going to do what you did, but backwards on the other. Taking it apart. So once you get that axle in there, do not hammer that axle in there. It'll go in first, real easy right there first, but getting it into the other side can get tricky. You can tap on it with the palm of your hand, and that's about all the pressure that you really want to put on there, and it'll just sink right through to the other side. There's a little groove on the axle that will be flush with your forks right there, and that's when you know it's as far as it'll go. The torque pressure on the axle bolt itself is 46 foot-pounds. The pinch bolts are 22, or I'm sorry, the pinch bolts are 16, and your rotor caliper is at 22. Your brake rotor is at 22 foot-pounds. Pinch bolts are at 16. There's not much on there, but your axle bolt is at 46. So once you get it back all together, you should be good. Hope you enjoy, and good luck.